I think we're live here on Facebook. Can anybody verify?
Yes.
Yep, we are live. Okay, it's 2 o'clock. We're live. We are the Arundel Patriot, and my name is Victoria Bruce. I'm the publisher and the editor of the Arundel Patriot. And this program that you're about to watch is called S.T.A.R.
We are the Arundel Patriot.
And if you have any volume on your phone, you can turn it down, my guests, or mute, or put your mute on your Zoom. The Arundel Patriot is a nonprofit, strictly volunteer organization that sprang up around the Anne Arundel County, Maryland area when we realized that all the local news there's very little local news that was getting out, and there were a lot of issues that weren't being covered. And we have been very successful in getting out information, not so much in raising money, but now we are on a new path, and we would like to invite all of you watching to become a sponsor, become a patron, and subscribe to the Arundel Patriot. And you can easily do that straight from this Facebook page that you're watching on. Just hit the shop button, and that'll take you to our Arundel Patriot Patreon page. And you can subscribe for as little as $5 a month. This show is the first sort of our flagship weekly show, and it was inspired by our good friend that a lot of us know, Monica Lindsay, who after Ahmaud Arbery's murder came to myself, Chrissy Holt, and Yasmin Jameson and said, what are you doing? What are you doing as white people to help solve this crisis? You have to stand up. And as much as even we thought, well, we are activists, you know, we are going to come out for that vigil and we're going to light candles. It's not enough. It's obviously not enough, and it's not working. So this is our attempt to really find new ways to engage our white brothers and sisters to stand up and recognize that this is a fight that has to be fought by all of us. And the events this week are earth-shattering and terribly, terribly heart-wrenching. And I have really never seen so many white people actually standing up for racial justice. And I was not born during the civil rights movement. So I am glad to see that. And today we're going to have a lot of people on the show talk about their experiences. And I'm just going to have everybody briefly introduce themselves. The first person I'm going to have start off with is Carl Snowden, who I've known since 2003 when I sought him out for the very purpose of trying to understand racism in our area in Maryland for the film Pippin, Zastrow, which took place on the night, or the main scene on the night Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and the riots that were taking place then. And we haven't seen that until today. So Carl, could you say a few words about what you're feeling now and your history?
Let me just first thank you, Vicki, for creating Arundel Patriots and others who put that together. It's necessary to have an alternative voice. And this particular medium allows people to have their voices heard, voices that normally would not be heard. Looking at the past event that took place last week with George Floyd, you have to have some perspective on history to know what that really means. The question has to be, why is this particular killing have had the response that it's had all over the nation? What is happening? And if you would go back 65 years ago, believe it or not, you would have discovered a man named Emmett Till, who's 14 years old. And people were so outraged that a 14-year-old boy could be murdered in Money, Mississippi for whistling at a white woman, that it did something to the civil rights movement. It gave it new life. In 1955, when the young boy, Emmett Till, was murdered, his mother held a funeral for him in Chicago, which is where he was from. He happened to be in Mississippi visiting relatives. And when she took and opened the coffin, and Jet Magazine filmed his mutilated body, it shocked the conscience of the nation. 65 years later, anybody who's watching the tape of a police officer with his knee on this man's neck as he indicates to the world he can't breathe, it has done something to the conscience of America. So I think if we look at 1955 and look at today, we're seeing a new generation that is being inspired to social action because of this unfortunate murder.
Thank you, Carl. Can I ask you, Jacqueline, to introduce yourself next, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Jackie, 1 second. Gonna unmute, ask to unmute.
I'm Jacqueline Boone Alsop, and I serve as the president of the Anne Arundel County branch of the NAACP, and also second vice president for the Maryland State Conference of the NAACP. And the NAACP stands in solidarity with Mr. Floyd's family, and also with the Minnesota City branch of the NAACP, with following the aftermath of this horrific killing that took place. And the NAACP is saying, and you will see the sign that says hashtag, "We are done dying." We are done dying. We are demanding justice. And we also encourage everyone, all residents of Maryland, to work in your local communities. And as you work in your local communities, begin to build stronger relationships with the law enforcement.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Nicole, can I have you unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Nicole Berg. I'm an Annapolis native. I've been here almost my whole life. I moved away for 12 years and I moved to all different coasts, and I marched with in solidarity with BLM in both Los Angeles and Denver. I have been very active ever since my mom taught me to be active in the first Million Mom March back in the mid-90s. And I see this as a global health pandemic. It's a global safety pandemic. The relations between even my very good friends and the police it's never been more tense and more distrusting in a time when we need safety probably more than just about anything, and that's not equal for everybody. I can, go over the speed limit 5 miles an hour. I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm going to come home. So that's why I'm here, and I'm here to help my other, white brothers and sisters understand my experience and why I feel the way I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Colin, can I ask you to introduce yourself and unmute yourself?
Hi, I'm Colin Wick. I'm a longtime Annapolis resident. Live in DC right now, and I'm just here to, I guess, mainly, see where I can give my energy. I've been a volunteer on political campaigns and an activist in the healthcare space for a long time. And I'm showing up to protests, right? But it's like, where can I be most effective is sort of the question that I want to ask and have answered in this process, right? Because it's hard to know where do I show up, what do I do, in a tangible sense, right? It's like I can post, I can stand in solidarity, but the actual be there at 2 o'clock sort of stuff is is what I want to ask about. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Colin. Joanne, can I ask you to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Joanne Scipio. I'm originally a native of Pennsylvania, but I've been in Annapolis almost 35 years. I'm a member of the Caucus of African American Leaders. I'm also a member of ACT, the Anne Arundel Connecting Together. I'm on the Mental Health and Addictions Subcommittee, and also belong to several racial justice groups. The biggest one being the Baltimore Archdiocese Racial Justice Circle, which meets immediately after this call, and the Broadneck Baptist Racial Justice Circle. And I'm very concerned as a Black woman and as a person about the unrest that exists and how important it is to get white people involved.
Thank you, Joanne. Reverend Marguerite, would you unmute yourself, please, and introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you. I'm Reverend Marguerite Morris. I come before you as a at least 40 years in ministry, 40 years as an activist, 40 years advocating for marginalized families and communities. I belong to CAST, Community Actively Seeking Transparencies, New Beginnings Ministries of the Heart, an organization called For Kathy's Sake, and previously at Leah's House. Plus, I touch on just about every other organization that's represented here. For me, it's personal. I was part of the result. Some of the things that I deal with emanate out of the 2012 scandal in Anne Arundel County with our police department and our county executive that made national news. My organization and myself are called often to testify on House bills locally in Annapolis with the ACLU. We're working locally to bring the CRB to our county and across the state of Maryland. And when I say it's personal, it's because I'm in this because not only do I want to help people, but I've suffered the lose of my own daughter that we've never gotten answers for. Her name was Catherine Sarah Morris in this county. And I want to say that as we go forth, that I'm tired. I heard you say no bars, but I want to say that as we go forward, that I'm tired of the crap and that we have live people. Not only do we have people, this horrible tragedy before us, you know, and we can go back into our history, but we have live people in this county that are catching hell. We have live people that are suffering. And my phone has not stopped ringing with people that want to be heard in the last 48 hours that are still angry because of ongoing things in our community. So it's an honor to be a part of this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marguerite, Reverend Marguerite. Catherine, can you unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Catherine Haas, and I guess I represent old people since I'm 82. And because I'm a Eurasian, I've certainly been subjected to all kinds of racism because I'm Asian, and right now a whole bunch of them are getting beaten up because supposedly we caused the COVID-19. And because I'm an immigrant to the United States, all of these issues of racism, of horrible attitude towards anybody who isn't white strikes me deeply. And I have marched like crazy, and I also spent many years on the reservation, and I've been adopted to the Lakota Sioux tribe. So I feel along with the Native Americans as well, and I marched against the pipeline and on Standing Rock. So I would like to help in some way because this George Floyd thing and all of this, it just sort of epitomizes the awful things that are happening in the United States. So I don't know what I can do, but I would like to be a part of solving, of changing the laws, of changing people's minds so that they see everybody as people and not as a category that they don't really like. And if I can, I would like to just quote this thing I found the other day. It says, it's by Toni Morrison after the Los Angeles riot. She said, "What struck me most about those who rioted was how long they waited. The restraint they showed, not the spontaneity, the restraint. They waited and they waited for justice, and it didn't come. No one talks about that." I just thought that was really beautiful.
Thank you, Catherine. Step, can I have you unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us, and thanks for everyone who put it together. My name is William Pratt. I'm actually Tony Pratt on the screen, but I'm the founder of S.T.A.R, which is a addictions and codependency support group that was founded in 2006. So I'm excited to be on and share my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Vicki Gibson? Wait, I think you muted yourself.
Oh,
There you go.
thank you for allowing me to participate. I'm a judge of the Orphans Court for Anne Arundel County, but I'm here speaking as a citizen, and I'm actively involved with a number of the organizations that have already been represented. I want to encourage that we focus on direct actions that we can take, and one we can take is that will address some of the fundamental issues is supporting civilian review boards across the country that have teeth, looking at reforming our employment discrimination laws, also looking at, people don't realize how important the judges are in this whole process. The judges in Anne Arundel County or in the state of Maryland get elected or get appointed for 15 years. When they participate in a judicial election, that term is 15 years. 15 years is a long time. So if you have a judge that is not as open-minded or has some proclivities, that's going to impact your community. There's a movement afoot to stop judicial elections. So right now, there's two ways that you can get elected. Get into a judicial position. You can either get appointed by the governor, or you can be elected. There's a move afoot to eliminate the election option. The governor, from what we can tell, does not appoint very many Black folks. The first Black female was recently appointed, and now she's in the process. Her name is Elizabeth Morris. She's in the process of going through an election. There hasn't been another, that was the first Black female in over 300 years. So that's a problem, and that impacts people of color. It impacts Black men and Black boys who go before these people, and they cannot relate to the people that are in front of them. So I'm here to urge, these are direct actions that we can do. People often ask, what can you do? What you can do is support civilian review boards, support judicial elections, support reform in the, stop making it so hard for us to be able to bring employment discrimination cases. And then I'm gonna close with, I heard this morning Rabbi Wolpe basically told a story, and he said, this man said to God, why aren't you, sending help to stop all the pain and hate? And God replied, I did, I sent you. So I wanted to close on that note.
Thank you, Vicki. And we'll ask Yasmin Jamison, our producer, she's on Facebook, to put things in the comments, your recommendations. And I'd like more information we can get out to our viewers on how we can help that, because I'd love not to have the judge elections. That would be great. Okay, Dewan Gay, can I ask you to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks. Dewan Gay, I'm the alderman of the 6th Ward in the city of Annapolis. And I'm excited to just be a part of this conversation based off of everything that's taken place over the course of the last week, really, since George Floyd was killed on Memorial Day. And, for me, it just kind of, just brought up old feelings and kind of got the energy flowing again, because we had seen this previously. We've seen it numerous times. And I think at some point we kind of grew numb to it. But seeing Breonna Taylor and seeing the video of Ahmaud Arbery being shot and literally murdered in cold blood, and then seeing this officer with such confidence and pride, have his knee on this man's neck for 9 minutes, and just see the lackluster response from the paramedics even, you know, taking his pulse while the knee is still on the neck. And, you know, it got me feeling again, because it's crazy that we have to continue to go through this. And it may have not happened here in Maryland yet, you know, on a large scale. I know we have seen police shootings, especially I think in Montgomery or PG County, where that took place. So we have seen incidents like that, you know, but it's getting close to home. And I think what I love to see in these protests across the nation, and that we even seen yesterday in Annapolis, is that young people are getting involved, and we're realizing how important our voices are, how much power we truly do have. And we're going to keep going every single day until justice is served. And I think that's critical for the 3 murders that I just listed, that we see justice for this, and that it changes. As Vicky mentioned, that we start to get judges in place that are going to fight on our behalf and that understand what is at stake. I mean, how hard is it to arrest someone for murder? That's like basics in criminal justice. So, you know, it's disappointing. And I'm excited to be a part of this conversation and see what solutions we can create.
Thank you, Dewan, and thank you, everyone. I think that 2 things were said here that will lead me to this first question that I just want to throw out there, because this is a very organic type of program, because I think we all have such value that we can bring to this conversation. Nicole mentioned that she could go 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, be pulled over, and have no problem. I remember talking to Dewan a couple years ago, and I was floored. He told me that he was pulled over 8 times in 7 days on the Eastern Shore of Maryland by the police. 8 times in 7 days. I don't think white people have any idea of the fear that Black people have to go through every day because of state-sponsored terrorism that are these police forces that are out there. So I'd just like to hear comments by those of you who've had to deal with this, and what could we possibly do to change that?
You know, I think I'll just kick it off then. For us in dealing with that, those incidents with my friends and everything has always been documented. Obviously, that's the first thing that we go to. But I think being in that environment on the Eastern Shore at the time, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Princess Anne, Maryland, again opened my eyes to the disparities in criminal justice system. I mean, and it just wasn't us all the time on campus. State troopers are pulling students over on 13 as you go to the local Walmart and things like that. It was consistent. And dealing with that, it obviously creates anxiety and stuff, because every single time you leave the campus, you feel that you're going to be pulled over. So just dealing with those things, I think for us, obviously now it's just documenting it. But I think that's where we are now.
Thank you,
Yes.
Dewan.
Are we using the raise the hand, or do we just go ahead and just conversate?
I have some hands raised, so let me go to the hand raises and then we'll come to you,
I'll raise my
Marguerite.
hand. I'll raise my hand. That's fine.
On
Okay,
that.
cool. Jacqueline? I think you need to unmute yourself, please.
Of course, as we all know, this is racial profiling, and racial profiling has been a major issue with African American, Black and brown people for quite a long time. I've heard too many times from individuals who have filed complaints because of the racial profiling that has taken place with them. And then when I listen to the stories that they tell me, it's really disheartening. And then to hear, you have to actually hear their voices when they talk about how they feel when they're stopped, just pulled over by the police officer, and they ask, what have I done? And they come up with some reason to stop them.
True. Vicky Gibson.
So I was talking to a property manager for one of the developments that I lived in locally. And we're talking about some of the activities that we were doing and with some of the organizations, because she was saying she wanted to get more active. And as we talked, she shared with me that one of the residents was a young Black male, and that he had had so many but stops within a short period of time in Anne Arundel County. He was from another state, that he decided to break his lease and leave Anne Arundel County because he felt that it was unsafe. The same thing with another couple. It was a young couple from another country, but they were Black, and they were being stopped so much that they left Anne Arundel County as well. The other incident that stands out to me, it doesn't have to do with the police, but has to do with white folks and their interactions with Blacks that they don't know in Anne Arundel County. And there was a gentleman who was sitting in his car, and he actually was very alarmed when he told me this. He said that, he was not far from the Starbucks that's on West Street, and he was sitting there enjoying his drink. And he saw that these white children were playing very rough with this little girl, and the parents were there, but they seemed to be ignoring the children. So he said something to them after a while saying, it looks like they're gonna hurt the little girl, who was much younger. And instead of them saying, thank you, we'll get right on that, they started recording him and harassing him as if he was the villain, like he was a predator or something like that. And that's the kind of thing that happens to Black folks, particularly Black males in this county. And it really needs to stop.
Thank you, Vicki. Reverend Marguerite?
Yes, a couple of things. First, I want to comment and then go back to what we were talking about. I want to remind everyone, and most of you already know, when it comes to issues of abuse, and this is something that really angers me because I'm appalled at all the shootings. But we as a community need to remember that by the time you get to a shooting, there has already been so much hell behind the scenes. And that's the manifestation of the abuses. So there's a whole lot of abuse. There's a whole lot of people that are getting the hell beat out of them that are not emanating in front page news because they got shot. We have to deal with preventing it from getting that far because it's going on right now. And then I wanted to say that even locally, and I know that Honorable Dewan and Judge Claudia Barber and William Rao, and I have a couple other complaints, are people locally that if you're being stopped in the same community, there's a problem with that one. So we have that all over, all over the county. So we just need to remember that and just within the last 24 hours, I've gotten a complaint, I think it's on Facebook, about a traffic stop where they retained 3 young men for about 2 hours. I'm hearing about it. They got about 45 seconds in Millersville or in Anne Arundel County that they were detained, vehicle searched, mom appalled that it happened, and there weren't any charges. They didn't find anything. So we need to remember as a people, as communicating right now, I'm angry, so forgive me, because I'm appalled at what we're seeing, the tragedy of what we're seeing, but my heart is bleeding for what's behind the scenes. And that's what we need to really build this conversation on prevention and hearing. A lot of people are angry right now and they're not being heard. Thank you.
Thank you. William, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. Hi again. So I was racially profiled coming out of my neighborhood, 32 Juliana Circle here in Annapolis, which is right down the street from Newtown 20 and Woodside. And the officer pulled me over at the stoplight. I was leaving home to go and do some landscaping. And I had my truck and trailer, and he pulled me over, walked up to the car, and he said, license and registration. I said, no problem, sir. I said, but what am I being stopped for? And he said, well, you didn't stop at the stop sign. And I said, well, that's kind of funny that I wouldn't stop at the stop sign. And I seen you sitting right there. And he said, well, what's in that bottle? I think I smell alcohol. And I said, sorry, sir, I don't drink. I said, if you had caught me about 25, 30 years ago, you might been pretty factual about what you're saying. I was like, that happens to be water in my bottle on the seat. So he proceeded to take it a step further and said, if I search this vehicle, would I find anything? And I said, I'm sorry, sir, but if you search the vehicle and you find anything, it will probably only be because you put it in here. I said, now, again, if it was 25, 30 years ago, maybe you might have something factual here. I said, but I work 2 jobs and I'm an honest and productive citizen of society. I'm just trying to do my job. And I really believe that you're really wasting my time and your time by stopping me when you're stopping me for nothing. Needless to say, to make a long story short, he never got my license and registration from me. He said, well, sir, consider it your lucky day. I'm gonna just let you go, my lucky day. I'm gonna just let you go. I said, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciated it. So I took it a step further and I reported it to the lieutenant at that time, only to like really not get any feedback, get any results. And I think one of the solutions that we maybe could come up with is when things like this happen and people are racially profiled against, that when they file complaints, that they get some feedback and follow up and hold whoever that officer is superiors, hold them accountable, hold the people accountable that don't reprimand these type of people. Because I think when these type of people don't get reprimanded or disciplined, I think it sends a message to them, a lot of what we're seeing now, that it's okay. You are licensed or privileged to go ahead and act in this type of manner. So I think when we start holding like our elected officials, whether they be black, white, whatever color, when we start holding these people accountable and responsible for actions they're taking that's not lining up with what their duties and responsibilities are, I think that's when we'll really start getting some things changed. But when we continue to vote and elect people who don't really represent their wards or communities like what they're called to do, we need to speak out and continue to speak out until change happens. Thank you so much.
Thank you, William. I'm going to go to Carl next.
Again, let me just share 2 observations. Focus on what we can do. And there's a lot of stuff we can do. There's no question we have so much options ahead of us and available to us. But I want to give a recommendation to both people online as well as those who are watching. So fundamental. Vicki had started off the conversation by saying this is unbarred. And I'm glad we're in a position where we can just talk frank with one another. If you ask people today, why is it that the word nigger, there was a time that whites throughout America used the word nigger on a regular basis without any fear of contradiction or any fear of consequences. And when you ask people, why is it that that is not the habit today? Why is it that whites don't routinely use that word? Some think it has to do with the fact that the civil rights movement. Some think it has to do with it's not the proper political correct thing to do. Others say it's adequate. I say it's something else. I say it's because Black people changed. There was a time you could have said nigger to Black people and nothing would happen. And my point is that there are some things people must do for themselves. One of the things we as a community must begin to understand is that change starts with us. I love that story that Judge Gibson gave, which I'm going to borrow. I love that. The rabbi says to God, why don't you deal with these issues of hate and racism? Why have you sent anybody to deal with it? He said, I did. I sent you. And that's what I think we need to understand as a community. Each of us have a responsibility to help change the world in which we are involved in. Lastly, I give this illustration, and it's the one that everybody gets to see it. They understand it. Today, if you tell the average Black family, man or woman, if they have a 16-year-old son who gets stopped by a police officer in Philadelphia, Mississippi, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or Annapolis, Maryland, and the white police officer calls him nigger, mistreats him, tell him to shut the F up, what should he do? And most parents who are Black would say without fear of contradiction, what you should do, young man, is to keep your mouth shut and survive that incident. Do not aggravate the police because you could die. And these parents tell them that because they want them to survive. They know that you can become a Michael Brown, you can become a Trayvon Martin, you can become a Sandy Bland, you can become one of the new statistics. And most people, including President Barack Obama, said that's the advice he would give to his people. I differ, because that's the same advice we've been giving to Black men and women since they came here. That advice we gave them in 2020 is the advice we gave them in 1920, 1820, 1720, 1620. Shut up, keep quiet, just to try to survive the moment. And I think what you're seeing is now Black people, particularly young Black people all over the United States, say that's it. No more keeping quiet, no more trying to survive for the moment. We're either going to have a society where everybody's going to be free or nobody's going to be free. And when you see what's going on all over the country, where people are responding, particularly people of color, are responding in the manner they're responding, it's because I think we've reached that point. Enough is enough. It's no longer rhetoric. And I end with this note. One of the most inspiring things for me was yesterday, seeing so many young people, idealistic, energized, mobilized, doing things. The one thing they lacked, and this is where we who want to be helpful can be helpful. The one thing they lacked was an agenda. Where do you take all that energy? Where do you take all that focus? And Vicky and others have tried to give some suggestion where it might go, but there are practical things that we can do at the local level as well as at the national level to make a difference. And one of the things that is so basic, but fundamentally important, is casting our vote, the power to be able, in a democracy, make a difference. So for people watching who want to know what they can do, June 2nd is Tuesday. Go out and exercise that power to vote. For people who are watching and want to know what to do, November 3rd is coming. A man named Donald Trump is on the ballot. And the only way we're going to change who's in the White House is to energize, organize, and mobilize people of color and people of conscience to make a difference. So that's my 2 cents worth in this discussion.
Thank you, Carl. I'm gonna have Colin, I want to introduce a new topic, but also you can talk on that topic when I go to you in just a second. I'd like to have my non-African American friends here on this call with me talk a little bit because I feel like as a white woman who has spent a lot of time trying to talk about the subject of race, making films about it, which Carl, of course, was in, and Janice Hayes Williams co-produced right here in the city. I feel like my circle purposely got smaller and smaller because my voice or this issue didn't reach out into the community like I thought it would, right? So I came here and I was in Annapolis from California and I thought, I really need to speak up about this. And I would go to cocktail parties and I would say, why is there so much segregation in this town? And you could hear a pin drop and no one even knew what was going, like they didn't even know there was this problem, these white people. So I want to ask my white friends, and Catherine, you are in your own category, but as well, what successes have you had in sort of bringing people into this fold? Because now's the time that we need to reach out to the person who's a Hillary voter, or Obama voter, who says, I'm not racist, but really never goes out and stands up to fix these problems. So I'll let Colin go first because I know he wants to talk on the other subject as well. Just need to unmute yourself.
All right, great. Yeah, thanks for letting me speak. Yeah, on the last topic, I just wanted to mention, and just this is something to consider, is like the interaction between like a Black man and a police officer. It's a very closed system, right? Like I, as like a white privileged person, like I can't really do much to intervene in that unless I'm observing it physically in the moment right there, right? Like if I can film, I can participate and like try to help de-escalate a situation, but I'm really troubled by the fact that like, except for basically electoral expression, right? I don't really have many tools available to like actually enact any sort of intervention in that moment, like in that one-on-one interaction. And it's really troubling, right? Like it feels very powerless. Like I don't know many police officers, right? Like I can't even challenge cops, like, you know, on a one-on-one interpersonal basis. Like the only options I have are sort of almost abstract political actions that I can take, and or filming a thing that's happening directly in front of me. But there's no sort of like intermediary thing. And I know that a lot of my peers have sort of expressed similar issues, right? Which is like, it's not tangible for us, right? Like it's purposely carved out for like, I am made to not experience the stakes of an interaction between the police and a Black person in the way that you experience it. Like it's on purpose so that I allow things to continue being the way that they are, right? Because if I felt the same stakes when I get pulled over for a, you know, rolling stop, then this would all be very different. But like there's a very deliberate pattern of like, you know, they greet me as hello sir, like how's it going, and I hand them my stuff and like it's fine and like there's no problem. And that makes it even harder, one, on a personal level, to like I actually have to spend time and energy empathizing all the way into the process, right? And it's also extremely hard to get my peers to get there with me, right? Because like if, you know, unless they're emotionally and like they're putting energy into being invested in learning about this process, right? Then like I have to bring them along through the entire like empathetic like chain to understand what the experience is like, right? That like I don't even have experience myself of. So I just wanted to elucidate that. Like I don't know what to do with that feeling, right? I just wanted to make sure that I at least said it on camera. And then, yeah, along the lines of what we were just talking about, Vicky, you know, we were talking about this in the house because I mean, like I live with 4 white men, right? And so we're just like talking through this and we're trying to understand like our role in this, what we can do. And one thing that I, in my experience, have found effective in talking to other white men about things and trying to make some progress is like, there was this sense when I was a kid that you have to whisper the word Black because you're not allowed to acknowledge like race as a concept in American life, right? Where you have to just be like, oh, well, like, you know, that's like a Black issue, right? And like you're not allowed to say it, but like we found that like it's actually very effective to just acknowledge that like race is just a part of the way that American life is. And like when you allow that part of the conversation to exist, then we can start being constructive, right? Like there was a denial for a while, it felt like, at least in spaces I was trying to participate in. So, you know, that's been like really, it's been, you know, like feeling like I'm allowed to acknowledge like the systematic inequalities that I'm benefiting from, right? And then like work from there is, you know, is a good, it has been really effective. At least it feels that way. I don't know if that's helpful. Trying to, I don't know, give some ideas and information. Yeah, it's the main thing is that like it's very intangible. It's very not real unless I'm opting into it, right? And like all I can do is vote or like post, right? And like those are my options basically, unless I want to go to a protest. And it makes it really hard to bring people who aren't like super invested already, you know, into the process. So I don't know. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Colin. It's good to talk about those challenges because they're real, right? They're real, trying to drag people along the way.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from Catherine or Nicole.
I'll go.
Go, Nicole.
So, you know, a lot has been brought up that brings up so much in my life. And, you know, this is going to go back to what Colin's asking, what you asked Vicky about, how do we bring in other white people? How do we have that conversation and how do we make them care, basically? And, you know, a lot of people are completely heartbroken right now for the past 3 months because of the pandemic. It affects us all globally. And so there's a lot of pain that people are feeling for multiple reasons. And now with all of this happening, they're starting to see the level of pain that people have been enduring for 400 plus years. So I have a lot of friends who are very much aware of what I've done in my life, and white friends who have come to me within the past 48 hours and said, Nicole, what can I do? Like, I don't know. What can I do? Like, I'm not racist. And I said, well, first of all, it's not about the one individual white lady that's racist. It's about a system. It is about dismantling a patriarchal white supremacist system that has, since the founding of the country, held down people of color and women and anybody who's non-white male. So how do you have that conversation is, okay, let's start about the system. And that's where your vote comes in. Look at your local judges, look at your local elected officials. Alderman Gay, I have to give it up to you. I saw what you did after, the most recent tragic violent eruption in our town, and that you put out probably the most well thought out, well planned plan of action and call to action that I've seen since I've been here. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And then to find those moms groups that, they want to do good, they just don't know how. And that's where we go into, look at your local elected official. What are they standing for? Are they looking at police reform? Are they looking for body cameras? Are they looking to have criminal justice backgrounds for their officers? Or is it just, okay, well, you're not completely insane, let's give you a gun. So, when it comes to that and having that conversation, it's really important to point out that it's systemic. We're not making it a personal attack on you, that you are a racist individual and you're responsible for X, Y, Z, but we are all responsible for making it change so that it's not a racist system. So that's my 2 cents.
And I'm thinking, it's been not easy. I think most of my friends are very open, at least those are the people I like, yeah. And when I was on the board of Quiet Waters as a nominating committee, it was really important for me to make sure that it was racially diverse. And I definitely got some pushback. So it's still uncertain where we are at that point. And I resigned because of it. So I think people start off, the racist is just so deep, Vicki. I think it's hard to change some people, but I'm also thinking that because of the yucky things that are happening in the news, some people who hadn't really thought this through maybe are seeing for the first time, yikes, something horrible is going on. And I just think what you did, for instance, yesterday when you were interviewing all those kids, right, and what they said, I feel very strongly that the young generation is much more open-minded, right? And so that's going to make this country better, I think, better for everybody. But and I like the suggestions. Okay, let's vote Trump out, let's vote good judges in so that the things will be better for everybody. And as for the police stop, I'm wondering if the person who stopped, if the Black kid is stopped and not compliant, what will happen to this poor kid? And I'm thinking, when I was stopped by a really horrible cop on the reservation, and he couldn't find anything wrong, but he was yelling at me and he was yelling at the young student I was with. I think he must have thought I was a drunken Indian because I was wearing crummy clothes because I was doing bird research and climbing trees, and I was driving a 1962 Oldsmobile with a cracked windshield. Anyhow, he was incredibly offensive and rude, but he couldn't find anything wrong with me. I had my registration, I had everything in order, and he walked off furiously. And all my white friends said, you better be really careful because they're going to stop you again and again because you embarrassed them because you didn't do anything wrong. But my Indian friend said, you need to write to the chairman of the board, you need to write to the chief of police and write about this cop and how rude he was. Because if you do that, nobody will stop you and he will be in trouble. And by gum, I did it against everybody's advice. And I was never stopped again. So maybe to be strong and fight back is the right thing if you're not too scared. And I was scared.
Thank you, Catherine. I see Joanne has her hand up.
Yes, I wanted to just say to the white folks, if you just show up, that's the beginning. If you just show up for things. And Colin, I know you want to bring your friends along, but maybe they'll come along and initially they might not be willing to say anything. But after you see enough, eventually you're going to want to say something. There are, I think unfortunately in this society, white people and Black people come together based on education or, work. We don't see each other in a more intimate kind of situation. And I think just speaking to your neighbor, speaking to the person at the grocery store, and you can find out something about Black people, and you'll find out we're no different than the rest of you. It's a systemic racism. And sometimes I get in trouble for saying this, but I think that most people are not racist. They're just a part of the systemic system that lets them believe that the things that they do are okay because that's just the way things work. And they go along with that forever and ever. Non-racist, most people, if you ask them, they'll say, I'm not a racist. They don't even see themselves, the things that they do as being racist. Okay, so really we should be working on anti-racism, not non-racism, working against racism and making people aware of what racism really is. The person who gets stopped. My husband opened the door one night and the alarm system went off and he didn't know the number and the police came. And he was in his pajamas and he had to show his ID to prove that he lived in that neighborhood. Now we've been in our neighborhood over 30 years and we're still the only Black family there. So it didn't look like a Black man should be living in that neighborhood. So he had to show his ID in his pajamas to prove that he lived in that neighborhood. Now that's racism. If it had gone off in one of the white homes, they would have said, okay, buddy, I'm sorry, you didn't know your ID, and let him go. So I think just getting to know who we are. It doesn't, I know getting involved in the political system is ideally what we should be doing, but there are a lot of people that just aren't quite ready for that. A lot of people aren't ready to speak up, but just showing up. I think that incident with George Floyd, had there been white men standing there, I think that police officer would have taken his knee off that man's neck. But there was a white woman saying something and they don't look up to white women any much more than they look up to Black people. But I think had the numbers of white people been there, the outcome probably would have been a lot different. Mute it. I see you talking, but you're muted.
Sorry, I said I see a hands up from Marguerite, Vicky, then Step, and then Dewan. Did you also want to comment after that? Okay, so let's go take Reverend Morris.
Yes, I'm hearing a lot of very good feedback, and I think it's great. But I'd like to ask a couple of questions. Let me make a comment. Because I think that if we bring this conversation into locally, we bring this conversation into, maybe you're already going to go there, I don't know, but how can we start to fix the pieces that are broken? And one of the things that's in our county, in our community, is there doesn't seem to be an acknowledgement that there's a problem. There doesn't seem to be an acknowledgement that we have these scary issues right here. And it takes me back to something biblical or something that I've heard that, the person is hungry and we want to feed them the mental part of them, and we're not taking care of that physical part of them. We need to start addressing that. I also want to put out there in response to, I think what William, I'm sorry, the different names out here, we've been pushing locally for something called the Civilian Review Board. And what that is, and for those that don't know, that's an independent organization empowered to hear both sides of a story. Because what you have is, even if you can complain about the profiling and that stops, if you go and you make a complaint to Internal Affairs, understanding the structure that we're against, the systemic structure that's in place that will not allow you to even know if there was any action taken against that officer. So even if you complain, we all need to understand, and most of us probably do, I'm just throwing it out there, that once you make a complaint, it becomes something else, which becomes something called a human resource issue. It's confidential. So now you've got people that are making complaints, they're speaking up, but they can't know the results because the system is designed to protect the officer in so many facets. That's why we have to connect, find out who's doing what, CAS, NAACP, caucus, connecting the dots. A civilian review board is something that's needed, and we need to talk about that and learn about that as a community and start supporting that, coming to the table, so to speak. Find out what that is, because some of these things, we can take the complaints, but when people come with a complaint, we need to let them know this is a long-term change. And what can you really do? Get involved in the issues and push towards changing the things that will better the system. Because otherwise we're not empowered to do very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Morris. I do agree. Those are really helpful, and we're going to put those also in the comments, the civilian review boards. And I know Yasmin's working on that now. Vicki, I think you had your hand up next.
So change starts at the top, and voting is really important, but also it's really essential is for everybody to complete their census and send it in. That's absolutely important, because we have to make sure that there's a fair distribution of resources, and you can't do that without them knowing through the census where everybody is. So, and it doesn't matter, it's everybody. It doesn't matter what your immigration status is, it is absolutely everybody. It is extremely essential. So those are the things that, getting that word out is also something that you can do. But I can't stress enough, Reverend Morris has kind of become our resident expert on civilian review boards. Her organization is working actively, and get involved with it. That's how you expand your horizons. Judge Claudia Barber is our expert on the judicial elections piece. Reach out to her. If you don't know how to get in touch with her, Vicki Bruce knows how to get in touch with her. There's so much that you can do as an individual, but I think that when I say that it starts at the top, there's a recovery task force, and we just learned recently that there's one person on that recovery task force that's Black that was not asked to join because they were Black. They were asked to join because they were a member of the clergy. That's not a commitment to equity, to ensuring that there's equity in the process. We had put on for a long time, put on the table the need for an equity officer that's a cabinet level position, and nobody's acted on it. There seems to be the wink of the nod. Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to do that, but then they don't do it, or they do a little bit of something, but then they don't really follow through to something that's more significant, tangible, that really feels like it's at the core of Anne Arundel County power structure, that equity is truly something that is being factored in. It's on the surface right now because we've raised it so often, and they're trying to appease us, but they're not really committed to it. And that's my personal opinion. And once they become committed, I'll be happy to apologize publicly. But that's my opinion, that there's no real commitment to it. So thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. I have Dewan, and I'm going to go to William and then Carl. I just want to throw it out there about maybe we could talk about body cameras. If somebody has information on that, why don't Anne Arundel County Police? I'm not sure if Annapolis Police do. Why don't Anne Arundel County Police have body cameras? Let's talk about that at some point, but I'm going to let Dewan go next, and then William.
Thanks. I do believe all police in the city do have body cameras. I'm not sure for the county, but I just wanted to continue off of what Nicole and Colin had mentioned in terms of just being allies and continuing to speak out. And I think that, as Carl alluded to earlier, the generation that's coming up now really has the opportunity to snap that, because what I'm seeing, a majority of the hatred, and like those that don't want to see this change, it's coming from a different generation. It's not my friends. It's not the people that I went to high school with. Going to Annapolis High School, we were a third, the most diverse school in the nation. In the state at that time, in terms of race and socioeconomics. So we learned how to work together, how to be in spaces together. And I love when my white friends stand up for us. And as Joanne said, if it had been a white male that was asking for that cop to take his knee off of George Floyd's neck, it would have happened. I don't know if you guys seen the news last night, but a similar situation happened in Seattle, where an officer was arresting an individual and he had his knee on his neck, and white men, were standing there screaming, "Take your knee off his neck." And at some point they got so close that the officers then, pulled the other officer off, but it still continued to take place. It's systemic, as you mentioned. Even up as to 2 hours ago, we've received an email to the city council referring to our police chief as the token who may not be up to the challenge of policing in this city because he allowed for us to protest. Things like that have to stop, because when you create narratives like that and when they continue to demean us, especially even when we're in positions of power, we lose our ability to lead. When individuals, just continue to threaten us like that. So for our allies to stand by our sides, I think that's critical. If we ever wish to snap any gaps, especially systemic.
Thank you, Dewan. William?
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you to Reverend Marguerite for her feedback about the Civilian Review Board. I'm a little familiar about the Civilian Review Board, but I also say again that this is a place where I feel that we need to hold our elected officials accountable and to change legislation that would allow them not to give the person that's racially profiled feedback about this. Just holding them accountable in so many different areas of what they're elected to do and to represent us. That's why we vote them in. I believe that the incident with George Floyd is really seems, I keep hearing this, like, why does this incident with him seem so much more worse than the other incidents? And I believe it's because of the history of how Blacks have been treated, that over the history of us being on this earth, it's like we've been not only possessed, but oppressed. And I feel like because of that, it's like dealing with bitterness. You get bitter first, and you really don't have a way or have a way of getting the bitterness off of you. And this just festers and grows inside of you. And then bitterness turn into anger, anger turn into rage, rage turn into retaliation, retaliation turns into murder. And I believe that's why the system, the situation with George Floyd seems to be so much worse than the other incidents. Not that it was, but because people have been oppressed and possessed. And now people are to the point, people of color are to the point where they're speaking out. People are using their voices, because at the end of the day, enough is enough. It's been enough marches, it's been enough platforms to speak out, but when are we going to take our voice and turn it into action? We have to do something. Faith without works is dead, and just talking about it, we have to be more to be about it. Thanks for letting me speak.
It's muted. You're still muted, Vicky.
Sorry, Carl.
Thank you. First, William, thank you for your comments. I think they're pertinent. And I love the idea of holding people accountable. And we must do that. We must hold all elected officials accountable. And quite candidly, there are things that they currently have the power to do that's not done. Whether it's a community civilian review board, whether it's cameras, and incidentally, Vicki, there's no cameras, body cameras in Anne Arundel County Police Department. It's one of the things we've been advocating for. And they won't be body cameras unless we collectively make it happen. One of the things I want to say, and this is really aimed more at young people, and I appreciate DeJuan Gay. One of the things I appreciated about DeJuan, and to a great extent, young people have to take on leadership role. The notion that somehow people just pass on the baton, that's not how it works. From a historical standpoint, look at any movement, any group of people. If you want to see how leadership happens, it's young people. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't invite Stokely Carmichael to be a leader. He didn't invite Huey Newton, who at 22 years old organized the Black Panther Party. Leadership always emerges from young people who move and take the reign of leadership. Dr. King was 26 years old when he became a national leader. Malcolm was 27 years old. Fred Hampton was 21 years old. Leadership emerged from young people who have a different vision and who are willing to take the torch. So rather than pass the baton, I like what Joe Madison said, we need to light the torches of young people. That torch is important. Can the world imagine what it would have been like if Dick Gregory at the age of 52 had decided to set aside and sit there? No, Dick Gregory understood his role was to energize and get people to have their torches lit and have more leaderships emerge. We need the wisdom of those who've gone before. And one of the things I want to really stress, particularly to young leaders, do not underestimate what a government will do. When you take on white supremacy, and that's what we're talking about, a white supremacist system, there is going to be a response to that. And that system will try to silence, marginalize, and ultimately neutralize people. And so what I want people to understand, particularly young leaders coming forward, something George Phelps said many years ago. I think of George often. George said, what we need to know how to do is zig and zag. Those who run straight lines will get shot. You have to understand how to navigate and negotiate the system. And we need to teach people these particular skills. I end with this particular comment to those that's online. A community civilian review board is not the panacea. Under Maryland, because of all of the current laws that exist, the best we can do with a civilian review board is do what Reverend Morris talked about, is give a forum for people to hear both sides of the story. But until we have legislators who change the law enforcement Bill of Rights, which give police officers tremendous power in Maryland, at best, a community civilian review board will have an advisory nature. That's what's in Baltimore City. That's what in other jurisdictions around the country. What they have discovered is that in order to be able to have an effective community civilian review board, you have to have an effective elected officials who are willing to make sure that that board has the kind of power that it needs, subpoena power, et cetera. So we need to be very clear. Elections have consequences. If you don't have people who are involved, who are politically committed to progressive ideas, nothing changes. And I end on this note, and Wim, again, I come back to a point you made. We need to keep every elected official, black, white, brown, liberal, conservative, we need to keep them all accountable. Because once you elect people to public office, they are going to do one or two things. Either they're going to get along and go along, or they're going to be committed to changing the system. And most people who vote for change. They don't vote for the status quo. Otherwise, they wouldn't get involved in the process. They leave it as it is. So let's hold our elected officials accountable. And let's have our young people understand that the way you get change in America is you take it.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Carl. I love the image. For those of you who haven't seen Pippin Zastrow in American Friendship, You can find Carl Snowden's early activism from high school, sit-ins and protests, and an entire career that is so impressive. And I thank you so much for that. Next person with their hand up, and I'm going in order of the way I've seen hands up, and Catherine, I've got you on my list, is Colin. Then we'll have Jackie and Joanne after that.
So I wanted to say something specifically at some point before you move to the next question about the body cams.
About the
Body cams.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
Hold on one sec, Colin. We'll talk to Vicky and
Is
Reverend-
it okay to say something now?
yes.
So about body cams, there recently was a press release from a number of Black organizations where they brought to the public's attention that the body cams for the county were included in the county's budget, but after the pandemic was started, the county executive and others had made decisions that they weren't going to be able to proceed with the body cams. Fortunately, because these organizations brought this out publicly, and I think it had a lot to do with the reality that body cams are needed on the heels of the Floyd incident, they decided the county executive decided at the press conference to keep the body cams in. But that's not to say that there won't be ongoing pressures placed on him as things continue to heat up or as closures are delayed. And as a group, again, that's a concrete thing that you can focus on and push for them to make sure that they fund those body cams. You know, that they can't just try to sneak them out. They can't, they can't reduce it. So maybe they do like a partial body cam. Everybody needs body cams. It's $5.2 million and it's very doable. And they are getting, I think it's like $100 million or something from the CARES Act. It was a substantial amount of money, and they can relate it to disturbances, to making sure that they can document disturbances related to COVID or whatever they need to do. But that's something that we can really get them to focus on. Also, if you get an opportunity, look at Trevor Noah's post, I think it was yesterday, where he talked about why the Black community is so outraged on the heels of the Floyd incident. And he explains that it's because it's accumulation of things that happened in a relatively short period of time from the Amy Cooper down. And it's very insightful. And the other person to look for is rapper Killer Mike did a press conference about the need for calm. And one of the things he mentioned in there was murder porn. And it's true. I mean, these videos on people Black men getting killed it's addictive. So it is kind of like murder porn, but it also normalizes it to a certain degree. And that's also very troubling. So, I think that we need to really do what I think it was Nicole suggested, and other organizations have already suggested. It's like the caucus and NAACP, that this trauma needs to be addressed as a public health issue. Racism is a public health issue. And Arundel has recognized it as a public health issue, but they haven't really effectively dealt with it. They haven't. It hasn't been prioritized. It's been acknowledged, but it hasn't been prioritized, and it needs to be prioritized.
Thank you, Vicky. I'm just in the interest of time, because we're only gonna go 90 minutes, I wanna get everybody a chance to speak who had their hand up. Reverend Morris, I'll have you briefly, if along the same lines of the body cameras, if you could just make a brief statement.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In reference to the body cameras, we have to remember that even if it's put back into the budget, until the council people elect it, it's not going to happen. So that ties into us talking about voting and putting the right people in place. Pittman can offer it. Don't get excited until they elect it and put it in there. It's not going to happen. But I also really need to respond very quickly to the comment about the Civilian Review Board. We must remember, civilian review boards across this nation emanated out of a crisis like what we just saw. When it came out of Las Vegas, it was because somebody was shot or killed. When it came, Freddie Gray, Civilian Review Board, across this nation, this is where they're coming from. Locally, we're lobbying or structuring this thing that we're working at the state level under the advice of the ACLU that's chipping away at state level creatively. Then we're trying to attack it at the county level, because Carl is right, but it has to be a combination. It's going to take a legislative move. Somebody else did start it. We need to continue it. And this, I'm telling you, I'm going to yield, but real quick, when my daughter died and we spent years running here, and there, I did not understand when I was trying to get answers in her death and police accountability that what was missing was someone to hear both sides of the issues. So I really want to say, I say that passionately because we need to focus in or try to work this both at the state level to make change and at the county level. So we wind up with something that's structured, that's going to help our community, and not wait till we have a Freddie Gray or Breonna or Floyd. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Marguerite. I'd like to say, we as civilians, I'm not exactly sure how during COVID-19, but many of us have been to these meetings and have testified and have made change, like when we were fighting to get Michael Perutka off of the county council and, hopefully raise a big stink. And there's a lot we can do. I would like to put it out there to the audience that the Arundel Patriot online, which is arundelpatriot.org, accepts submissions for articles. We want to ask Reverend Marguerite to write something and make this, put this down on paper so we can remember it. We want instructions. As white people, we want to help. And it would be great to have all this stuff down. Vicki, you as well. Anybody here, we've published a lot by everybody here, but continue. These are super important. They're great things. And that would be wonderful to be helpful to that. I'm going to go to Colin. Thanks for waiting, Colin.
Thanks for letting me speak. Yeah, the things I really liked what Carl was saying about holding elected officials accountable, and like one thing that that really stands out to me is like, are we willing to primary our elected officials, right? Because we're a democratic state up and down, right? All the way up, all the way down, federal, all the way down, county, local, right? Like Gavin and Stewart, like, are we willing to challenge them and like put somebody up against them at a primary level, right? And if we're not, then we're in a different strategic situation when trying to build out these civilian review boards or, reform the police in some way, right? And that's like a real question, right? Because when we talk about, I don't know, when I think about accountability for any issue, right? Like, are you willing to primary an elected official that you have a relationship with, right? Because that's like that's when they'll start listening. Otherwise, they're going to continue doing the thing that gets them reelected. I don't know, and it's like a troubling balance, right? Because on one level, you do want to maintain that relationship, and maybe you don't. I don't know, and that's like not for me to decide. Like, I'll show up and I'll help knock on doors and I'll donate some money if I can, right? But like, I need leadership on that level. I don't know whether I'm taking cues from the Black community on whether I'm supposed to be supporting Stewart's efforts or if we are making a political move, against or to challenge Stewart's, decision making, right? And I don't know what to do with that. The other piece is that I've been really thinking about is that like I'm not seeing any sort of legislative action group from police, right? Like there's no police for reform group, right? Like there's no veterans for peace, but for cops. And that's really troubling. You know what I mean? Like you would think if there were one of those right now is when they would be making their big statements and putting out their press releases and like, hey, police, like if you are in support of reform, then you can join this organization, right? Donate to this thing. There isn't any of that. And, that's really concerning to observe. And like, maybe one thing that we can do, like me as a white man, but we as a community can do is build out some way of rewarding police who are willing to speak out or, defect isn't the right word, but like just sort of say like, here's what's going on, right? Because a lot of the thing is, my understanding of the situation is that, they're in a union, they're, protected by the state in every possible way, right? So they have this cushion that they fall back on if anything goes bad. And if they defect, if they say this is messed up, there's this happening, there's no cushion, right? Like you are just completely out on your own. And so we're not, in some ways, setting up a situation where, you know, police are in a position of, you know, reforming themselves in some, I don't know what this thing is. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot, right? Because it's this monolithic thing. Like we don't have a police officer on this call, right? It would be unbelievably challenging to get one on this call even, right? Like to find somebody who'd be willing to actually talk about what they would be willing to do within their own system to change anything, you can't find that person, right? And so like it's this monolith, and we got to find like leverage points within that monolithic organization that we can like actually affect some change or do. I don't know. This is where I'm sitting from, and it's just something I don't know if anyone has thoughts or anything on that. So thanks.
Thank you, Colin. I think that's a great statement. It's a great question. I was tossing that around this morning and I was thinking, you know, there's a lot of, but all the good cops. And my reaction was, well, if you are a priest, but you're not a pedophile and you cover up for a pedophile priest, are you still a good priest? So if you are a cop and you watch your cop friends murder somebody and you cover that up, are you a good cop? If you don't stand up and out the people that are doing the bad deeds, are you a good cop? Jackie, we'll go to you next.
Yes, Vicky, I wanted to comment on the cameras for police officers, but Vicky made it very clear, and so did Reverend Marguerite. But one of the statements I wanted to make also with that is for those individuals that are watching to please contact your county council person. And in your district, call your county council person and ask them to support it, because they too play a large part in the budget process and of getting that funding in there. Something else I wanted to mention too had to do with change. If we are looking, we know that racism is systemic. So when we look at change, we need to look at ourselves as well. Individuals need to look inside themselves and ask the question, am I racist? We're too quick to say, I'm not racist, but then look at your behavior and think about what your thoughts are when you see things happen. When the incident happened in Minnesota, and I think it was the governor in Georgia who made the comment that if you can say I can't breathe, then you're breathing. Come on, that is, and if he thinks that way, knowing that the pressure was put on this man, he's kneeling on his neck, almost 200 pounds on the back of someone's neck. And you're saying, well, if he's saying I can't breathe, then he's okay. He's not okay. We all witnessed this man, George Floyd, die in front of us. And that's why it's so horrific. And that's why people are so angry. And that's why they're up in arms. Across the country yesterday, police officers brutally beat people, shot them with rubber bullets. So we're still being brutalized. We're standing up for justice, and I will continue to stand up for justice. The other point I wanted to make had to do with youth. And DeJuan, I really, really commend you on your leadership and the youth leadership in this county. The number of youth who came out yesterday for that march and to hear them speak was outstanding. Not only here in Annapolis, but across the country. To hear those youth talk about their feelings, their action, and what's going on in their generation. They see the need and they want to take action and they want to do something. Listen to our youth. Our leaders are being developed through the youth.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Joanne, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to make a comment?
The only thing I guess, I forgot to lower my hand from before, but since you did call me, is that we need to recognize that there is a problem, admitting that there really is a problem. That's the first step. And then everybody can be counted. That's the next important thing that we can all do, and then vote. And from there, people will do the individual things that work best for them. And I still say, come out, stand up, and speak up. And I think that those are the most important things to do. So.
Thank you, Joanne. Catherine, I have you next on my list, and then Dewan, and then Step. And we're about 5 minutes from the end of the show. So if you can make.
Okay, I'll be quick. It's from listening to Carl and others, it seems like, okay, now I know what to do. All of us who are listening, we write to our county executive, we write to our governor, we write to the person who represents us, and we say we want a civilian review board, and we want every cop to wear a camera because they're going to behave better if they've got a camera that's recording every single thing they say and everything they do. And if everybody who's listening to this writes or calls their representatives, I think it will make a difference, because I'd read somewhere every letter that the politician gets really represents 300 other people who think the same way. So the letters mean something. And besides, the post office needs our stamps. So, so I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly, when Colin was speaking, he was so on point, and then Carl followed up with something as well with, and as what Catherine is saying, it's just, you know, I know that's what makes the difference for me when people come before the council and they advocate for things. But in the city, we don't see that enough. More people will come before the city council and advocate for a boat slip than they will for, you know, life-changing legislation. You know, so we need that presence. And it helps, especially for my colleagues who have a majority white district. It helps when white allies show up and speak out, not only on things that happen in Ward 1 or Ward 8, but also speak out on things that happen in our communities and, you know, contribute to how we can fix this stuff. You know, we got decent legislation up, but it will go nowhere if we don't have voices behind it. I mean, we've postponed everything. I think we did 10 or 15 pieces of legislation at our last meeting were postponed. So we need people advocating, you know, just for those issues. And then to Carl's point, I do get fearful when I speak out on behalf of these issues, especially as a Black male, the only Black male on the council, because I don't want retaliation. I don't want them to think that I hate the police, you know, because it's like, I'm not going around saying like, you know, I don't like cops and all this stuff. I just want for the bad actors to be held accountable, because every officer is not bad, you know, but those who are, as you mentioned, they just hold them accountable. How hard is that to ask for? So we need those voices as well, so that our elected officials who are Black just are not fearful that if they do speak out, because I know I'm not the only one. I talked to a number of my friends who are, you know, advocating for things. They are fearful that if they speak out, retaliation will happen. So, you know, just support our voices. And I think that's how we'll get to some sort of solution that will benefit all of us.
Thank you, Dewan. Next up is William. And I just want to say we're going to go a little bit over time. So the last four speakers, the last three will be William, William, Marguerite, we'll go Colin, and then Carl, I'll have you make the final word, if that's okay. All right, William, you're up.
Okay, I'll make this really quick. Again, speaking in reference to the body cams, again, and I can't stress this enough, it's like, if we have body cams, and I'm all for it, because I believe that body cams will show us more detailed information from beginning to end. But again, I can't stress it enough. I believe that we really already have a sense of body cams in the form of civilian recording. When civilians record these actions that's taking place and they get presented, and again, nothing gets done or very minimal disciplinary actions only sends the message to say, you can continue to do this. So at the end of the day, I mean, if we're not really fighting for these legislations to be changed, I can't say it enough. We can have all the evidence we want to. And at the end of the day, if all a cop has to do, and I'm not for every cop being a bad cop, because I know that's not true. But if all a cop has to do is say at the end of the day, I feared for my life. So that gives you the right at that point to shoot somebody or kill somebody, in whatever way you do it, and you get to walk basically scot-free, or you get fired from your job only to change districts or state or county and go and just get hired under the same type of system. Until we change the system, as my wife always says, Tony Strong crack, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Reverend Morris, you, and then Colin, and then Carl.
I wasn't going to say anything, believe it or not, but now I'm going to comment personally on something real quick. I'm currently working on what I call my last legal move as we speak. I've currently just last night finished a brief to the Court of Appeals, Morris versus Altamari, about police accountability and corruption, 905 pages of exhibits, 50-page briefing. I had an issue, and this is not about that case. I just wanted to throw that out there because these are the things that are going on behind the scenes that we don't realize, and we're fighting for justice. But another issue I had in reference to complaining, just as a private citizen, a complaint, we had an issue within the last year and a half, within the last year. I called up one of the captains, I'd like to talk about his community, us having a conversation. He said to me, Reverend Morris, Altamari says you have to make a complaint to Internal Affairs. Long story, I made a complaint to Internal Affairs just about having a conversation about correcting reports as a citizen, something that affected me. And I'm telling you, it's been like 6 months. I haven't heard a thing back. So William, you're right. If this is the mentality that we have, that if you take a complaint to them and you have just to say, something went wrong, and no one ever gets back to you and they're not held accountable, this is what we're dealing with. And that's what we need to think about. So thank you very much for your time. This is the reality of our county and our community.
Thank you, Reverend Morris.
You're welcome.
Colin, you'll unmute yourself.
Okay. Sorry, I'd left my hand up, so I didn't.
Oh, you didn't have a comment.
No,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, well, then we're going to go straight to Mr. Carl Snowden to give us some final thoughts.
Yeah, that's the feedback on the Facebook apparently.
Oh, if you can just turn the volume down on it, it'll be fine.
Let me thank you again, Vicki. Thanks for a number of things. One, I don't think people really understand what you've done, how important it is. And I just want to take a moment to make sure that people understand that the Arundel Patriot is an important, newly created institution that allows us to have this discussion. We started off with this particular discussion with you asking people, and I want to sort of end on this note, to support Arundel Patriot. The way we get the message out is through this medium. It's not free. There's something everybody can do. There used to be this statement, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. So let your something, if nothing else, be just to make this contribution. $5 a month turns out to be $60 a year. But think of what you're getting. You're getting voices that are independent, voices that speak truth to power, voices that tell people what they need to hear. So I really want to encourage people to do this. Obviously, a discussion like this could go on for days and months, and we still would not completely address all the issues. So I want to tell you that on June 9th, Tuesday, June 9th, the Caucus of African American Leaders meeting will be totally dedicated to the subject of how can we stop the killings in the Black community? How can we as a community begin to respond to putting together the kinds of strategies that will prevent this from occurring. Now, I want to end with this note, which really is on a story, and I think people need to know it. When Mrs. Emmett Till's mother, Mrs. Mabel Till, had to lift the coffin up in which her son was dead. He was 13, 14 years old. It was her only son. And I often think of those mothers who have lost their sons and daughters to police violence. What do you say to a mother? What do you say to a father who knows that their son or daughter not coming back ever again? What do you say to people who have lost their loved ones through white supremacists, as I think was the case with Richard Collins, who was murdered by white supremacists? What do you say to people who have lost hope? And what I think we say to them is that those deaths will not be in vain, that many of us on this program are dedicating the rest of our lives to ensure that justice will prevail. Dr. King said, only when it gets dark enough can you see the stars. And for a lot of us, we're seeing the stars. People like DeJuan Gay is a star. There are other bright young people coming forward. Jackie knows of a young man named Drake Smith. All this great potential. I am so optimistic that the future is bright because of men and women like them who are willing to take a stand, who are willing to get involved. No one will do for any generation those things they're not willing to do for themselves. Standing up, speaking up, and keeping the struggle going. So again, Vicki, thank you for this forum. Thank you for what you've done, not just today, but since you've been in Annapolis. You have made a difference. And in the final analysis, that's what we want each and every individual to do, make a difference. Thank you for making that difference for us. God bless. Get right on time.
Thank you so much. You've been a great
Thank you,
influence
Vicki.
for me. You've been a great guide through this journey. And you've been a super supporter of the Arundel Patriot. I'm so glad that we have this platform. It is a community group. It is not me, it's everyone. And we encourage writers and editors. And I see so many people here who have been involved. I invite the audience who's watching on Facebook to this show. It's called S.T.A.R, Straight Talk About Racism, Going Beyond the Bullshit. Okay, and I think you saw that today. We are determined not to, for platitudes, we're determined to find answers. And so please, you can email me at editor@arundelpatriot.org. As Carl said, you can become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Hit the shop button or just go to our website. And everyone is invited. This is a community organization and we're all in this together. Thank you so much. And I'm gonna cut the live feed and we will see you next week at 2 o'clock, everybody.
Thank you.